You know that feeling when you finally stop trying, and something inside just settles. All at once, without warning. Tonight, we're going somewhere quiet, with that feeling, into what meditation reveals about the mind that is already resting beneath your thoughts. Welcome to Psychology for Sleep, wherever you are right now. Perhaps lying in the soft dark of your room, your breath already slowing without effort. Let yourself arrive here completely. We'll trace 100 psychology facts about the science of meditation, from the first breath that shifts your nervous system, to the hidden architecture meditation quietly reshapes inside the brain, to the place where science and stillness become the same thing. These calm journeys through the science of the mind build a quiet community of people who are learning, gently, to rest. A soft like, a subscribe, or sharing this with someone who needs a peaceful night creates a pathway for more tired minds to find this space. One sleepy soul at a time. Your presence here is the warmest kind of support. Let yourself settle completely here. Feel your jaw unclench. Your shoulders drop without asking them to. You don't need to hold on to any of this. Sense that slow, warm heaviness moving through you, like your mind dimming its own lights, thought by thought, until only a soft, breathing quiet remains. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. You're resting in the space between one thought and the next, where the mind forgets to be busy. Let your awareness soften with the silence. And now we begin. Meditation has been practiced by humans for at least 5,000 years. The earliest written records appear in ancient Indian texts called the Vedas, composed around 3,000 years before the Common Era. Cave paintings and ceremonial objects suggest the practice may be even older, woven into human life before written language existed. But here is what researchers have only recently begun to understand. What ancient practitioners described as inner quieting turns out to have a precise, measurable signature in the brain. The wisdom arrived thousands of years before the instruments to confirm it. This is, perhaps, one of the more quietly satisfying patterns in science. The instruments arriving, centuries later, to confirm what stillness had already taught. There are hundreds of meditation styles practiced around the world today, but most fall into two basic families. The first is focused attention, directing the mind to a single point, like the breath, a sound, or a gentle phrase. The second is open monitoring, a softer, wider awareness that notices thoughts without following them. Research suggests these two approaches engage overlapping but distinct brain networks. Focused attention tends to strengthen the circuits of deliberate control. Open monitoring tends to expand the circuits of aware, non-reactive presence. Most traditional practices weave both together, like two instruments tuning the same quiet instrument. The first moments of meditation already change the body. Within just a few minutes of sitting quietly with focused attention, heart rate begins to slow. Breathing deepens and becomes more regular. Blood pressure gently drops. The sympathetic nervous system, the part that prepares the body for action, begins to release its grip. The parasympathetic system, responsible for restoration and calm, gradually takes over. This shift is sometimes called the relaxation response, a term introduced by Harvard physician Herbert Benson in the 1970s. Decades of research since have confirmed what he observed: the body knows how to rest. Meditation gives it permission. Breathing is one of the most direct pathways between meditation and the nervous system. When you slow your exhale, making it longer than your inhale, you directly stimulate the vagus nerve, the longest cranial nerve in the body. The vagus nerve threads from the brainstem all the way down through the heart, lungs, and digestive organs. When it activates, cortisol drops, heart rate settles, and a deep physiological calm follows. Many meditation traditions have used extended exhales intuitively for centuries. Research has now traced the exact mechanism through which they work. The body was always listening. The amygdala is a small, almond-shaped structure deep in the brain that processes emotional responses, especially fear and threat. In most people, it fires quickly and strongly in response to perceived stress. Studies show that consistent meditation practice gradually reduces amygdala reactivity, not by suppressing emotion, but by creating more space between the trigger and the response. A systematic review published in Biomedicines in 2024 confirmed that meditation induces measurable reductions in amygdala reactivity through neuroplasticity, the brain's capacity to rewire itself through repeated experience. The amygdala doesn't disappear. It simply learns, slowly, that not everything needs to be a fire. The prefrontal cortex, located just behind the forehead, governs our capacity for calm reasoning, perspective taking, and emotional regulation. Research has found that long-term meditators tend to have greater cortical thickness in the prefrontal regions of the brain compared to non-meditators. This means the tissue is physically denser, with more connections and more gray matter. One landmark study found these differences even after accounting for age. The prefrontal cortex naturally thins with age, but in long-term meditators, this thinning was significantly reduced. Meditation, in this sense, may be one of the gentler forms of maintenance for the thinking mind. The brain's default mode network is a collection of regions that become active when the mind wanders. When we replay conversations, worry about the future, or drift through aimless thought, it is the neural signature of the mind talking to itself. Research consistently shows that experienced meditators demonstrate quieter activity in the default mode network during practice. The main nodes, the medial prefrontal cortex and the posterior cingulate cortex, show reduced activation compared to non-meditators. This may partly explain why meditation can feel like finally setting something heavy down. The part of the brain that generates mental noise is, for a while, simply still. Mind wandering and unhappiness are closely linked. A notable Harvard study found that people spend nearly half their waking hours thinking about something other than what they are doing, and that this mental wandering, regardless of content, tends to correlate with lower reported happiness. Meditation directly targets this pattern by training the mind to return, again and again, to the present moment. Each return is not a failure. Each return is the practice. Researchers describe this as one of the most consistently replicated psychological effects of mindfulness training, a gradual, gentle reduction in the time the mind spends somewhere it doesn't need to be. The insula, a region folded inside the brain beneath the temporal lobe, helps the body map itself, tracking sensations, internal states, and the quiet signals of interoception, which is the sense of what is happening inside. Studies show that meditation increases both the activity and the gray matter density of the insula. This may explain why seasoned practitioners often report a more precise, compassionate awareness of their own body's signals. They are not more sensitive in a way that causes distress. They are more attuned, aware of discomfort early enough to respond gently, rather than only after it has become overwhelming. So yes, even in its earliest stages, meditation is already reshaping how the mind processes the world. Not through force, but through repetition. The same brain that learned to worry can, with practice, begin learning something quieter. These changes are not metaphorical. They show up in imaging studies, in blood tests, in the electrical signals of neurons, firing in slightly different patterns than they did before. The mind is not fixed. It is, as the research keeps showing, always in the process of becoming. Cortisol is the body's primary stress hormone, released by the adrenal glands in response to perceived threat. Chronically elevated cortisol is associated with sleep disruption, immune suppression, and accelerated cellular aging. Multiple studies have found that regular meditation reduces baseline cortisol levels. The reduction is modest in short-term practitioners, but grows measurably with consistency over months and years. In a clinical trial, participants who practiced a form of heartfulness meditation for 12 weeks showed significant decreases in cortisol compared to a control group. The body, with time and repetition, learns that the threat that was never there does not need defending against. Telomeres are the protective caps at the ends of chromosomes, tiny molecular structures that shorten naturally with each cell division. And with stress, shorter telomeres are associated with accelerated cellular aging and increased vulnerability to age-related illness. A comprehensive meta-analysis of 25 studies, involving over 2,000 participants, found that mindfulness-based interventions produced small to moderate improvements in both telomere length and the activity of telomerase, the enzyme that helps maintain and repair them. Research also notes that meditation's benefits appear to work partly through reducing cortisol, which is directly toxic to telomere integrity. The mind healing may, in this quiet way, also be the cell's healing. BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, is sometimes described as a natural fertilizer for neurons. It supports the growth of new neural connections, the survival of existing neurons, and the brain's overall capacity to adapt and learn. Stress and chronic anxiety tend to reduce BDNF levels. Meditation has been shown in several studies to increase them. Higher BDNF is associated not only with better mood and cognitive flexibility, but also with healthier sleep architecture. The pattern of sleep stages the brain cycles through each night. A calm brain, it appears, tends to grow in ways that also help it rest. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter widely associated with feelings of ease, contentment, and belonging. Meditation has been found to modulate the serotonin system, partly through its effects on the prefrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate, regions that influence how serotonin is released and received. This is not the same as taking a medication. The effects are gentler and more indirect, but they accumulate. Practitioners often describe a subtle, persistent shift in their emotional baseline, not a forced happiness, but a quieter steadiness, like the difference between a lake in wind and a lake on a still morning. Both are the same water, gamma brain waves, oscillating between about 30 and 100 times per second. are associated with high-level cognitive integration, the weaving together of information from different brain regions. In a study published in 2025 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, researchers at the Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai used electrodes implanted deep within the brain to record neural activity during loving-kindness meditation. They found that this style of meditation produced measurable changes in the strength and duration of beta and gamma waves in the amygdala and hippocampus, structures rarely accessible by standard recording methods. The researchers noted that these same wave patterns are disrupted in mood disorders like depression and anxiety. Meditation, it seems, can reach places in the brain that were previously difficult even to observe. The hippocampus is the brain's primary structure for memory consolidation and spatial navigation. It is also one of the few brain regions in adults where new neurons can form, a process called neurogenesis. Chronic stress and elevated cortisol are known to suppress hippocampal neurogenesis and can shrink hippocampal volume over time. Studies of long-term meditators have found larger hippocampal volumes compared to non-practitioners. This finding suggests that the stress buffering effects of meditation may partly protect the hippocampus from the gradual erosion that prolonged stress tends to produce. Memory, in this sense, may be among the quieter beneficiaries of a consistent practice. The anterior cingulate cortex, a band of tissue that wraps around the top of the corpus callosum, deep in the brain, plays a central role in attention regulation, error detection, and the ability to notice when the mind has wandered. It is, in a sense, the brain's internal observer. Studies consistently show increased activity and greater connectivity in the anterior cingulate cortex among meditators. A study published in 2022 found that even 1 month of daily mindfulness practice significantly strengthened the coupling between the anterior cingulate and other key attentional networks. The observer, with training, becomes more reliable, not more critical, but more gently present. Sleep and meditation share more than calm. A landmark study from Vanderbilt University, published in 2025 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, found that focused attention meditation measurably altered the flow of cerebrospinal fluid through the brain in patterns resembling what is observed during sleep. Cerebrospinal fluid carries away metabolic waste, including proteins associated with Alzheimer's disease, from the brain's tissue. This waste clearance system, called the glymphatic system, is most active during sleep. The researchers found that meditation may stimulate a similar, if milder, form of this clearing process. The brain does not have to be asleep to begin tidying itself. The glymphatic system itself was only confirmed to exist in living humans in 2024. Researchers at Oregon Health and Science University, in a study funded in part by the National Institutes of Health, injected a tracer dye into the cerebrospinal fluid of patients undergoing brain surgery and used MRI to watch it move in real time. They observed the fluid traveling through the perivascular spaces, channels surrounding blood vessels in the brain, and flowing into the brain tissue, precisely as predicted. What had been demonstrated in mice and suggested by post-mortem human samples was finally confirmed in living people. The brain's internal cleaning system is real. It is active, and sleep is among its most powerful activators. Pain perception can be significantly altered through meditation. Studies using functional brain imaging have found that mindfulness-based meditation reduces both the subjective experience of pain and the neural activity associated with pain processing in the orbitofrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate. Importantly, research has shown that meditation-based pain relief operates through mechanisms distinct from the placebo effect. It engages a different neural pathway. It's not simply the expectation of relief. For many people with chronic pain conditions, this distinction matters. The relief that comes from a quiet, present attention is not imagined. It is genuinely different. One of the most consistent findings across decades of research is meditation's effect on trait anxiety, the ongoing background level of anxious arousal that colors daily life for many people. A systematic review published in 2024 found that mindfulness-based interventions produced significant changes in the brain regions most associated with anxiety, vulnerability, including the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. These were not short-lived effects. In studies that followed participants for months after the end of formal programs, the changes held, gradually becoming part of how the nervous system responds by default. The practice leaves something behind. Even when the meditation cushion is long put away, there is a more precise measure of nervous system settling than heart rate alone. The vagus nerve, already discussed for its role in breathing, also serves as the primary channel for what scientists call heart rate variability, or HRV. Heart rate variability measures the subtle, moment-to-moment variation in the time between heartbeats. Higher HRV is associated with better cardiovascular health, more flexible stress responses, and stronger emotional regulation. Lower HRV is associated with anxiety, depression, and poor sleep. Research consistently finds that regular meditation increases HRV over time. The heart, as it turns out, learns to breathe too. Loving-kindness meditation, sometimes called metta practice, involves systematically generating feelings of warmth and goodwill toward oneself, toward loved ones, and toward all beings. Studies have found that this particular form of meditation increases positive emotions more reliably than neutral relaxation controls. It also appears to increase social connection, reduce implicit bias, and strengthen what researchers call pro-social motivation, the quiet pull toward caring for others. In the Deep Brain Recording study from Mount Sinai in 2025, it was loving-kindness meditation specifically that produced the most pronounced gamma and beta wave changes in the amygdala and hippocampus. The act of wishing someone well, it turns out, has a neural signature. Meditation changes how the brain responds to negative feedback. Studies have found that meditators show less neural reactivity to self-criticism, the internal voice that catalogs failure and assigns blame. Experienced practitioners tend to process negative self-relevant information with greater equanimity, not by denying it, but by observing it without the same intensity of identification. This is sometimes described as decentering, a slight but profound shift in perspective, from being inside the thought to watching it pass. It is, in a sense, discovering that the thinker and the thought are not the same, that what you observe cannot be entirely what you are. These observations reveal something that both ancient traditions and contemporary neuroscience now point to. The mind is not a fixed object. It is a process, and processes can be gently, gradually shaped Each of the 25 facts we've explored so far traces a different doorway into the same truth: that directing calm attention inward, repeatedly and without force, changes something real in the biology of the brain. Not dramatically, not all at once. The way a river changes stone, slowly, through sustained presence, one breath at a time. Let's pause here and notice your body. Right now, your brain is filing away what it has heard, quietly deciding what to keep, what to soften, what to fold into the fabric of tonight's rest. Breathe out slowly. Appreciate each quiet system running inside you. Your heart beating without being asked. Your lungs filling and releasing. Your nervous system beginning, moment by moment, to choose ease. You are not just resting. Your body is doing what it was always designed to do. Notice the weight of your body against the surface beneath you. Feel that slow, warm settling, the nervous system beginning to believe that there is no danger here. There isn't. Now we continue. Neuroplasticity. The brain's capacity to rewire itself through experience underlies every measurable effect meditation produces. For most of human history, it was assumed that the adult brain was largely fixed. The understanding that neurons could forge new connections and reorganize existing ones throughout life only gained scientific acceptance in the late 20th century. Meditation researchers have since become some of the most compelling documentarians of neuroplasticity in action. Every hour of practice, every returned breath, every moment of quiet observation is an experience that the brain uses to reshape itself. In this sense, attention itself is a kind of construction. Long-term meditators show greater connectivity between the default mode network and the salience network, the brain system that determines what deserves attention. This enhanced communication may underlie one of the most frequently reported qualities of advanced practice, the capacity to notice when the mind has drifted, without frustration and without delay. The brain notices itself more quickly, and it returns to stillness more readily. A study published in 2022 in Scientific Reports found that just 31 days of daily mindfulness practice significantly strengthened these inter-network connections in people who had never meditated before. 31 days. The brain was already listening. Sleep quality is among the most practically significant outcomes of meditation practice. Multiple large reviews have found that mindfulness-based interventions meaningfully reduce insomnia symptoms, decrease the time it takes to fall asleep, and improve overall sleep quality, particularly in adults with chronic stress or anxiety-related sleep difficulties. Importantly, these improvements are not simply the result of relaxation. Research suggests that meditation specifically targets the cognitive arousal and rumination patterns, the looping, worried thinking that most commonly interfere with sleep onset. It quiets the mind in the particular way that sleep requires not suppression, but release. Inflammation is the immune system's ancient response to threat, useful in acute situations, harmful when it becomes chronic. Elevated inflammatory markers, including interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha, are associated with depression, cardiovascular disease, and accelerated aging. Research consistently finds that mindfulness-based interventions reduce markers of systemic inflammation. The mechanism appears to involve the same stress reduction pathways that lower cortisol, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which governs the entire cascade of physiological stress responses. A calmer nervous system produces, over time, a quieter immune system. The body and the mind continue to reveal themselves as one system, not two. The immune system itself is responsive to mental states in ways researchers are still mapping. Studies have found that meditation increases the activity of natural killer cells, immune cells that identify and destroy infected or abnormal cells. Other research has found increases in antibody production following mindfulness training. The most widely cited early study in this area, published in Psychosomatic Medicine, found that an 8-week mindfulness course led to measurable increases in antibody titers following influenza vaccination. The participants who meditated generated stronger immune responses. What the mind does in stillness, the body hears. Gray matter, the darker tissue of the brain, containing the cell bodies of neurons, tends to reduce in density with age. Studies comparing experienced meditators with matched non-practitioners consistently find greater gray matter density in multiple brain regions among those who meditate. These regions include the hippocampus, the frontal cortex, the insula, and the sensory cortices. The differences are not enormous, but they are consistent. They appear across different meditation traditions, different countries, different measurement methods. What seems to protect gray matter density is not the specific technique, but the regular practice of turning quiet attention inward. White matter, the brain tissue that forms the connections between regions, also shows measurable differences in meditators. Diffusion tensor imaging, a type of MRI that tracks the movement of water molecules along neural pathways, has found greater white matter integrity in long-term practitioners. This improved structural connectivity may underlie the enhanced communication between brain regions observed in functional studies. The brain's roads, it appears, become more stable with use, not through effort, but through the kind of repetition that feels like rest. Interoception, the brain's map of internal body states, is refined through meditation. The insula and the anterior cingulate cortex, both involved in interoceptive processing, show increased activity and structural changes in experienced practitioners. Research suggests this improved self-sensing may be one of the mechanisms through which meditation reduces anxiety. People who are more accurately aware of their body's signals are less likely to misread normal physical sensations as signs of danger. The racing heart that is actually excitement, the mild tension that is only hunger, the body becomes less mysterious and therefore less frightening. Compassion is not simply an emotion. It has a neural signature. Studies using functional MRI have found that loving-kindness and compassion meditation specifically activate circuits involved in reward, motivation, and affiliative behavior, the systems that evolved to support connection and care. These activations are distinct from those produced by neutral relaxation. Compassion practice also appears to reduce what researchers call empathic distress, the painful over-identification with another's suffering that can lead to burnout or withdrawal. It seems to cultivate a kind of warm, stable presence, close enough to care, steady enough to stay. Attention is trainable. This may seem obvious, but it has significant implications. Studies show that focused meditation practice measurably improves scores on standard tests of sustained attention, selective attention, and attentional switching, the capacity to move deliberate focus between tasks without loss of clarity. These improvements appear even after relatively modest amounts of practice. Some studies find significant effects after just a few weeks of daily sessions of 20 minutes. The mind, like the body, responds to gentle, regular training, and its preferred training ground, it seems, is stillness. The posterior cingulate cortex, a region closely tied to self-referential thinking and the experience of being absorbed in one's own narrative, shows reduced activity in experienced meditators during practice. This quieting of self-referential processing may be related to the quality many practitioners describe as a loosening of identification with one's own story. Not an erasure of self, but a lightening. The difference between being the character in the novel and being the quiet reader, equally present, but less caught. Compassion meditation has been shown in clinical settings to reduce burnout in healthcare workers, improve emotional resilience in caregivers, and reduce secondary traumatic stress in people regularly exposed to others' distress. These findings suggest that meditation is not only a tool for personal well-being, but a potentially significant resource for communities and professions that require sustained empathy. The brain that learns to rest also learns to extend its care further, not by becoming harder, but by becoming more sustainably soft. Body scan meditation, a practice in which attention moves slowly and deliberately through each part of the body, noticing sensation without judgment, has been found in clinical trials to significantly reduce chronic pain, fatigue, and the psychological distress associated with long-term illness. It also improves sleep in populations with chronic pain, partly by reducing the hypervigilance, the constant, anxious monitoring of bodily sensation that tends to amplify discomfort and prevent rest. The body scan asks something simple of the mind. Just notice. Just be here. That alone is often enough. The default mode network, already noted for its role in mind wandering, is also the network most involved in the construction of a continuous sense of self. In meditation, and particularly in advanced states of open awareness, this network quiets in ways that practitioners across traditions describe as a sense of expanded presence, or dissolution of the boundary between inner and outer experience. Researchers at the University of Haifa, in a study published in 2025 in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, found that long-term meditators showed increased occurrence of sensory and attention-based brain states and a decrease in the self-referential states associated with rumination. The self, studied closely enough, begins to look more like a process than a fixed thing. We have now traced 40 facts through the early and middle terrain of meditation science. And what the evidence continues to suggest is this: the act of sitting quietly, of breathing, noticing, returning, again and again, produces changes that are not incidental to health, but central to it, not dramatically, not all at once, but reliably, measurably, across cultures, across decades, across the vast variety of human brains. The research keeps pointing to the same quiet truth: stillness does something real, something the body has been waiting for. You're still here with me. Thoughts perhaps softer now, body perhaps heavier. Take a slow breath. Notice how something in you has settled. We're exploring the science of the mind together. And somewhere out there, someone else is lying in the dark, needing exactly this. A gentle like or subscribe might carry this to them. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. Meditation changes not only how the brain fires, but when. Electroencephalography, EEG, measures the electrical rhythms of the brain in real time. Experienced meditators tend to show increased alpha wave activity during practice, particularly in frontal regions. Alpha waves, oscillating between roughly 8 and 12 times per second, are associated with relaxed alertness, the state sometimes described as effortless wakefulness, aware but undisturbed. It is the brain state that exists just between focused engagement and drowsiness. Many people who meditate regularly find this state begins to arise more easily, even outside of formal practice. Theta waves, oscillating between 4 and 8 cycles per second, are associated with the hypnagogic state, the dreamy, dissolving awareness at the edge of sleep. They also appear during deep meditation. In experienced practitioners, theta activity increases substantially during practice, particularly in frontal and midline regions of the brain. Some researchers describe advanced meditative states as deliberately induced theta states, a wakeful presence held at the very edge of the territory where the sleeping brain normally lives. In this sense, meditation may be learning to visit sleep's threshold while still conscious enough to stay. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, sometimes abbreviated MBCT, was specifically developed to prevent the recurrence of major depression in people with a history of 3 or more episodes. Clinical research, including an individual patient data meta-analysis drawing on data from thousands of participants, has found that MBCT reduces the risk of depression returning by roughly 1/3 to nearly half compared to usual care. For people with 3 or more prior episodes, for many individuals, this places it in a comparable range to continuing long-term antidepressant medication, offering a skill-based, non-pharmaceutical path for staying well. The World Health Organization now recognizes mindfulness-based interventions as evidence-based approaches for depression and anxiety. The practice that began in ancient contemplative traditions has now entered clinical guidelines in multiple countries. Meditation and gene expression is one of the more intriguing frontiers in this research. Several small but carefully designed studies have suggested that intensive meditation practice may alter the activity of genes involved in inflammatory pathways, including those connected to the body's stress response systems, such as the NF-kappa B signaling network, a key molecular pathway in immune and stress regulation. This research is still preliminary, with findings requiring replication across larger groups, but it points, consistently, in a direction that feels coherent with everything else. The science has been showing that what the mind practices repeatedly may gradually be heard, in subtle ways, by the body at its most fundamental level. This, it should be said, is scientific imagination working at the edge of what is currently confirmed. But it is imagination pointing somewhere real. Loving-kindness meditation has been found to increase activity in the temporal parietal junction, a brain region involved in perspective-taking, empathy, and the understanding of other minds. Practitioners show greater activation in this region when imagining others' experiences, even outside of formal meditation. This suggests that compassion practice gradually extends the brain's natural tendency towards social understanding. the boundary between self and other, held tightly by daily life and habitual thinking, loosens a little. Others become more fully real, not as abstractions, but as presences. The relationship between meditation and sleep deepens in ways still being studied. Recent research suggests that deep meditation may stimulate the same glymphatic clearing processes described earlier, the cerebrospinal fluid dynamics that help remove metabolic waste from the brain during sleep. A study published in December 2025 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences by Vanderbilt researchers found that focused attention meditation produced changes in aqueductal cerebrospinal fluid flow that were directionally consistent with sleep and opposite to the patterns seen in aging and neurodegeneration. The brain, in this quiet state, is not simply resting. It may be cleaning itself. Pain, attention, and the mind are more closely linked than most people realize. Neuroscientist Fadel Zaidan and colleagues have documented through brain imaging that mindfulness meditation reduces pain not by distracting from it, and not through placebo, but by genuinely altering the processing of pain signals in the brain. Specifically, meditation reduces activity in the orbitofrontal cortex, a region that ascribes significance and unpleasantness to pain. While the raw signal from the body remains the same, the sensation arrives, but the mind's response to it changes. The difference between pain and suffering may, in part, live in this gap. Transcendental meditation, a form of mantra-based practice popularized in the West during the 1960s, has been among the most extensively studied styles in cardiovascular research. Multiple clinical trials have found that regular transcendental meditation practice significantly reduces systolic and diastolic blood pressure. The American Heart Association has reviewed this evidence and noted that transcendental meditation merits consideration in clinical practice for hypertension management. The heart, quieted by the breath, quieted by the mind, quietly heals itself. Emotion regulation, the capacity to experience feeling without being overwhelmed by it, is consistently improved by meditation practice. Researchers describe two distinct mechanisms. The first is reappraisal, the ability to consciously reframe how an event is understood. The second, perhaps more interesting, is acceptance, the capacity to allow an emotion to be present without resistance. Studies show that meditators who develop acceptance-based regulation tend to recover from emotional disturbance more quickly than those who rely primarily on suppression. The mind that allows what is there tends to pass through it more easily than the mind that tries to hold it back. Halfway through our journey tonight, the answer is beginning to take shape. Meditation is not a single thing. It is a family of practices, each placing attention differently. On the breath, on the body, on sensation, on kindness, on silence. What they share is not technique but direction, turning the mind gently, patiently, back toward what is actually here. And each return, each gentle, uncritical return, teaches the brain something it will carry forward, even into sleep. Even now, perhaps especially now, every memory you have kept, the mind reconstructed a little differently each time you remembered it. Right now, your brain is actively processing today, softening edges, filing what matters, quietly letting go of the rest. This is happening without your effort. You don't need to help it. Consider how each cell in your body will be entirely replaced within years. You are already in the midst of a slow, continuous becoming. And tonight is simply one quiet night in the middle of that long, unhurried process. Your rest tonight is not a pause from life. It is part of how you continue. The experience of time shifts during meditation. Many practitioners report that deeply absorbed states feel both timeless and somehow complete, as if duration itself had softened. Research using neuroimaging and subjective time estimation suggests that meditation alters the activity of the insular cortex and the basal ganglia, regions involved in the brain's internal sense of time. In states of deep, focused attention, the internal clock appears to slow, or to become less salient. The moment expands, not into pleasure, necessarily, but into a spaciousness that daily life rarely provides. The relaxation response described by Herbert Benson involves specific, measurable shifts in gene expression. Research from the Benson-Henry Institute at Harvard Medical School found that people who practiced relaxation techniques for weeks showed differential expression in over 2,000 genes compared to controls, including genes involved in mitochondrial function, the energy-producing processes of the cell. The cells were doing something different, something more efficient, more conserving. The body in stillness is not merely waiting, it is reorganizing. Meditation and creativity are linked in ways that researchers are beginning to document. Open monitoring practices, those that cultivate wide, non-directed awareness, have been found to enhance divergent thinking, the kind of flexible, associative cognition that generates novel ideas and unexpected connections. Studies measuring creative output before and after meditation find consistent improvements in open awareness conditions. This may seem unrelated to sleep, but it is deeply relevant. The mind that can let go of fixed paths during the day is also the mind that can let go of fixed thoughts at night. The hormone melatonin, produced by the pineal gland and central to the regulation of sleep, is affected by meditation. Several studies have found elevated melatonin levels in experienced meditators, particularly in the evenings. One study measured melatonin in the urine of meditators on retreat and found significantly higher levels compared to control periods. Melatonin also functions as an antioxidant, offering some protection to cells against oxidative damage. The practice that quiets the mind may also, through melatonin, gently tell the body it is time to rest. The anterior cingulate cortex, already associated with attention, regulation, and self-monitoring, also plays a key role in what researchers call conflict monitoring. The ability to notice when competing impulses or contradictory information are pulling in different directions, without becoming overwhelmed by the tension. Meditators tend to show more efficient conflict monitoring. They navigate ambiguity more steadily, perhaps because they have practiced repeatedly the experience of holding two things at once, the wandering thought and the returning awareness, both present, neither catastrophic. Social anxiety is characterized partly by an overactive threat response to social evaluation, the fear of being judged or excluded. Studies have found that loving kindness and mindfulness practices measurably reduce this pattern, partly by shifting the neural response to self-relevant social information away from the amygdala and toward more regulated prefrontal processing. People who had previously found other people's opinions a source of significant distress began to hold those opinions more lightly, not with indifference, with a warm distance that allowed them to still care, but with less fear. Some of the most compelling new evidence in meditation research comes from studies examining what happens at the cellular level. Research on monks and advanced practitioners with tens of thousands of hours of meditation experience has found not only the expected structural and functional brain differences, but also differences in patterns of cellular aging, including longer telomeres and higher antioxidant activity compared to matched controls. These findings are preliminary and the sample sizes are small, but they point, quietly, in a consistent direction deep. Sustained practice may be doing something to the body that cannot yet be fully measured. Meditation has been found to reduce the phenomenon of experiential avoidance, the tendency to suppress, distract from, or escape uncomfortable inner experiences. Studies find that practitioners over time become more willing to allow difficult emotions to simply be present, without the urgent need to fix, change, or explain them. This increase in what researchers call psychological flexibility is one of the most robust predictors of mental well-being across the literature. The mind that no longer fears its own contents is, paradoxically, much freer. There are currently over 600 published randomized controlled trials examining the effects of mindfulness-based interventions. This represents a significant expansion from just a few dozen studies at the turn of the millennium. The breadth of this research now covers populations from children to elderly adults, from people with no health concerns to those managing chronic pain, cancer, addiction, post-traumatic stress, and major depression. What was once considered a niche or alternative practice has, through careful scientific attention, become one of the most studied behavioral interventions in all of psychology. Compassion fatigue, the gradual depletion of empathic resources through sustained caregiving, affects a significant portion of nurses, therapists, social workers, and others in high-contact helping professions. Research has found that compassion meditation can serve as a protective factor, not by reducing empathy, but by shifting the emotional processing of others suffering from distress-based to care-based. The nervous system is not asked to feel less. It is invited to feel from a more stable place. This distinction between being moved and being swept away is perhaps one of the most practically useful things meditation can teach. The body's stress response follows a predictable arc threat perceived, sympathetic system activated, cortisol released, physiological arousal sustained. Then, ideally, recovery. In people with chronic stress or anxiety, the recovery phase is often delayed or incomplete. The system stays activated after the threat has passed. Research shows that meditation reduces the duration of this post-stress activation, not the initial response, necessarily, but the recovery time. Meditators return to baseline more quickly. The wave still comes, but the water settles sooner. Meditation practice has been associated with improved emotional granularity, the precision with which people identify and label their emotional states. Research by psychologist Lisa Feldman Barrett and others suggests that the ability to distinguish finely between emotions, not just sad, but disappointed, not just anxious, but uncertain, predicts better emotional regulation and greater psychological well-being. Interoceptive awareness, enhanced by body-focused meditation, appears to support this finer discrimination. The mind becomes better at reading itself, and what can be named can, more often, be gently held. The thalamus, a central hub deep in the brain that acts as a relay station for sensory information, shows altered activity patterns in experienced meditators. Some imaging studies find reduced thalamic activity during practice, consistent with the gating of sensory input, the process by which the meditating brain, without suppressing sensation, becomes less reactive to it. This may be part of why seasoned practitioners can sit in noisy or physically uncomfortable environments and maintain equanimity that is not performance, but genuine. The thalamus has learned to turn the volume down. When asked, non-sleep deep rest, sometimes abbreviated NSDR, is an emerging area of research examining rest states that are not sleep but share some of its restorative properties. Yoga Nidra, a practice involving guided body awareness in a relaxed, lying position, has been found in neuroimaging studies to produce a state with brain activity patterns that partially overlap with those of light sleep. A small but carefully designed neuroimaging study, conducted across research centers in London and Copenhagen, found that Yoga Nidra meditation was associated with a roughly 65% increase in dopamine release in the ventral striatum, the brain's reward and motivation center. The same practice produced elevated theta wave activity consistent with deep relaxation states. The finding, from a study of 8 experienced practitioners, awaits replication in larger samples, but points in a consistent direction. The resting brain may reward itself for resting. We now understand that meditation is not one experience. It is a landscape. Some moments of practice are effortless and expansive. Others are populated by restless thoughts, physical discomfort, doubt, and boredom. Research on long-term practitioners reveals something unexpected. The difficult sessions are not failures. They are the training, the act of noticing distraction, returning, and releasing judgment, repeated through restlessness, through fatigue, through the ordinary difficulty of simply being present, appears to be exactly what builds the neural structures associated with equanimity and resilience. The mind learns most from what it must gently navigate. The relationship between meditation and addiction recovery is one of the more actively developing areas in clinical research. Studies have found that mindfulness-based relapse prevention significantly reduces rates of relapse in alcohol and substance use disorders compared to standard treatment, particularly for people who struggle with craving-driven behavior. The mechanism appears to involve increased awareness of the craving itself, without automatic action, the gap between impulse and response that practice slowly creates. In that gap, something other than the familiar pattern becomes possible, returning once more to the default mode network, now from a different vantage point. Meditation modulates this network differently, depending on the type of practice. Focused attention practices tend to suppress default mode activity. The mind becomes quieter in the regions that generate self-referential chatter. Open monitoring practices show a different pattern. The default mode remains somewhat active, but its relationship with other networks shifts, becoming more integrated, less rigid. The mind wandering is still present, but held differently, observed rather than inhabited. Both are useful. Both teach the mind to know itself a little better. The practice of walking meditation, often overlooked in favor of sitting practice, has been found to produce measurable improvements in attention and mood, and to reduce rumination in ways comparable to seated mindfulness. The combination of gentle movement and present moment sensory awareness activates slightly different neural pathways than seated practice, including motor regions and areas associated with proprioception, the sense of the body in motion. Some researchers suggest that alternating between seated and walking practice may offer complementary benefits. The mind does not always need to be still to become more quiet. One of the most consistently replicated effects of meditation across different populations, ages, and meditation styles is a reduction in rumination, the repetitive, often negative cycling of thought around a problem or source of distress. Rumination is not problem-solving. It is the experience of the mind returning compulsively to what it cannot immediately resolve. Studies show that even brief mindfulness interventions reduce the frequency and intensity of rumination, partly by strengthening the meditator's capacity to notice when the thought cycle has begun, and to choose, gently, not to follow it further. The benefits of meditation are not limited to formal practice. Research has found that even brief, informal mindfulness moments, a few deliberate breaths before a meeting, a moment of body awareness while waiting, a single conscious pause in the middle of a busy day, produce measurable short-term reductions in cortisol, heart rate, and subjective stress. The brain, once trained through regular practice, appears to respond more quickly and completely to these brief interventions. The formal sessions teach the skill. The informal moments use it. Between the two, something begins to change the texture of daily life. Grief and loss respond to mindfulness differently than acute stress. Research with bereaved individuals has found that mindfulness-based approaches reduce the intensity of intrusive grief-related thoughts and improve the capacity to experience positive emotion alongside sadness, the ability to hold both at once. This finding resonates with what practitioners in contemplative traditions have long described. The goal is not the removal of difficult feeling, but the creation of enough inner space to hold it without being defined by it, the heart large enough to contain what has been lost, without shrinking around the loss. The brain's reward circuitry, the dopamine-based systems that drive motivation and pleasure-seeking, is influenced by meditation. Studies have found that meditators show reduced activity in reward-processing regions in response to mildly pleasant stimuli, suggesting a shift away from hedonic seeking and toward a more equanimous baseline satisfaction. This is not a numbing of pleasure. It is more like a quieting of craving, the reduction of the restless sense that something is always missing. Many long-term practitioners describe this shift as one of the most practically significant changes they notice wanting less. Not out of deprivation, but out of a growing sense of sufficiency. Compassion and self-compassion are different practices, and researchers have found they engage partly different neural networks. Self-compassion, the extension of warmth and understanding toward oneself in the context of failure or pain, activates the ventromedial prefrontal cortex and the insula in ways associated with self-soothing and safety. This is distinct from self-criticism, which activates threat processing circuits. Studies have found that people who score higher in self-compassion following meditation training show significantly lower rates of anxiety, depression, and burnout. The most practiced form of kindness may ultimately be the one directed inward, not as self-indulgence, but as foundation. Advanced meditators, studied in depth at contemplative neuroscience centers including the Mind and Life Institute and Harvard's Meditation Research Program, show a pattern of cognitive functioning distinct from both ordinary rest and ordinary task performance. They appear to operate in states of what researchers describe as effortless presence, high sensory clarity, stable attention, low reactivity, and a reduced sense of fixed selfhood that is nonetheless fully functional and oriented. This state, which traditional practices called by many names, has now been documented in brain imaging and behavioral testing. It is real, it is stable, and it grows with practice. The way most things worth having do. Meditation has now taught us something that changes how we see the mind. The mind is not simply a receiver of experience. It is also a shaper of it. Every act of attention, every returned breath, every moment of quiet, non-judgmental presence is both an experience and a lesson. The brain learns from it. The body reflects it. The research, taken together, suggests that the most powerful tool for mental and physical well-being may be neither a drug nor a procedure, but simply this: the decision to sit quietly, to breathe, to return, and to stay for as long as you gently can. You might feel tired now. That is perfectly fine. Consider this: your brain has been practicing tonight without effort. Every breath you've taken since we began has already been both rest and gentle training. The nervous system does not require your conscious permission to settle. It only requires your willingness to stop standing in the way. Like the sleeping brain, cycling through its stages of rest without any effort on your part. Your body knows this rhythm. It has always known it. You don't need to direct this. You only need to allow it. We're almost to the end of our facts now. The body in meditation mirrors the body approaching sleep. Heart rate slows. Muscles soften. The eyes, even when closed, cease their small unconscious movements. Brain waves shift from faster, more alert frequencies toward the slower, deeper patterns of approaching rest. This is not coincidence. The same neural circuitry that governs the transition from wakefulness to sleep is also engaged during deep meditation. The body does not always need night to begin its descent. Breathing, in most meditation traditions, is not controlled. It is observed. This distinction matters. Controlled breathing introduces effort. Observation allows the nervous system to find its own rhythm, often slowing naturally, without instruction. As attention settles, research suggests that this effortless slowing of breath is among the first physiological signs that the relaxation response has been engaged. The body, trusted to breathe, tends to breathe in exactly the way it needs. The vagus nerve, that long, wandering nerve, connects the brain to the gut as well as the heart. The gut-brain axis is now recognized as a significant pathway for emotional information. Research suggests that meditation, through its effects on the vagus nerve, may improve gut function and reduce symptoms in people with stress-related digestive disorders. The calming that begins in the mind does not stop at the neck. It travels the entire length of the body, reaching places we rarely think to associate with quietness. The quality of attention during meditation matters as much as the quantity. Research comparing meditators who practice with non-judgmental, curious awareness versus those who approach the same technique with effort and self-criticism finds significant differences in both psychological and physiological outcomes. Gentle attention produces better results than strained attention. The mind learns most readily when it is allowed to simply observe, without the added pressure of performing. Trying less and accepting more tends to work better. Something that might be called meditative absorption, a state of deep attentional immersion in which the usual sense of striving fades, has been documented in brain imaging studies. In these states, the salience network and the default mode network enter unusual patterns of coordinated activity. The experience, as reported by those who have had it, is often described as effortless clarity, thinking without a thinker, awareness without an edge. Researchers describe it as a genuine, neurally distinct state, not a romantic metaphor, and it is more common than expected, arising not only in veteran monks, but also in people who have practiced consistently for just a few years. The relationship between meditation and aging is one of the more poignant lines of inquiry in the field. Research has found that long-term meditators appear biologically younger than their chronological age on several measures, including telomere length, inflammatory markers, cardiovascular fitness, and cognitive function. This does not mean meditation grants immortality. What it suggests is that the consistent reduction of chronic stress, improved sleep, enhanced immune function, and reduced inflammation that meditation produces over a lifetime may collectively slow certain processes of biological aging. The body, less chronically braced, ages more gently. Sound is often used as an anchor in meditation. A bell, a singing bowl, the sound of rain. Research on sound-based meditation has found that sustained, gentle auditory focus produces many of the same neural changes observed in breath-focused practice: reduced default mode activity, increased alpha wave synchronization, quiete amygdala response. The brain does not especially care what the object of attention is. What matters is the quality of the attending: gentle, patient, returning. Compassion meditation changes how the brain processes other people's faces. Studies have found that practitioners show increased activity in regions associated with affiliation and care, and decreased activation in regions associated with social threat. When viewing images of human faces expressing pain or distress, they see suffering, and they move toward it rather than away. Not drawn into suffering, but drawn toward presence. The face of another becomes, with practice, more fully a face. Children who are taught age-appropriate mindfulness practices show measurable improvements in attention, emotional regulation, and prosocial behavior. Studies in school settings have found reductions in anxiety and improvements in academic focus following mindfulness curricula. The early evidence suggests that the brain's natural plasticity in childhood and adolescence may be particularly responsive to attentional training, that the neural benefits of meditation may be most readily consolidated when practice begins early. Music, breath, and attention all converge in certain meditation practices, particularly in traditions that use chanting or toning. Research on chanting and humming has found that vocal vibration directly stimulates the vagus nerve through the larynx, producing measurable reductions in heart rate and increases in heart rate variability. Some researchers describe chanting as a form of extended exhale, with additional neural benefits from the acoustic and social dimensions of shared sound. The body, singing to itself, soothes itself. The prefrontal cortex's capacity to modulate the amygdala, to calm the alarm before it becomes a crisis, is measurably stronger in experienced meditators. The connection between these two regions, sometimes described as the cortical regulation of subcortical threat response, becomes more efficient over time. The prefrontal cortex doesn't become a wall against emotion. It becomes, with practice, more like a patient guide, one who can hear the alarm without being ruled by it. The present moment, as an object of attention, has no content that needs to be resolved. It requires nothing of the future. It carries nothing from the past. Research on the neuroscience of present moment awareness suggests that this temporal narrowing of attention, focusing on what is simply here, now, as sensation, as breath, as the sound of the night, reduces activity in the brain regions associated with anticipation and regret. This is the neural correlate of peace. Not happiness, necessarily. Not the absence of difficulty, simply the absence of unnecessary suffering that comes from living in a time that is not now. The boundary between deep meditation and the onset of sleep is not always clear. Experienced meditators sometimes report moving between states of quiet awareness and very light sleep without the sharp boundary that most people experience at sleep onset. Research supports this permeability. The brainwaves of deep meditation and those of early NREM sleep overlap considerably in the theta range. Some practitioners describe this blurring of boundary not as lost focus, but as a kind of arrival, the mind releasing its last held shape and flowing into the formlessness where rest has always been waiting. The word mindfulness, as used in Western psychology, is a translation of the Pali word sati, often translated as remembering or present recollection. In its original context, it referred to the practice of remembering to be present, of returning, again and again, to the reality of this moment rather than the constructed reality of fear and desire. The neuroscience of the last 3 decades has essentially confirmed what this ancient term described, that the mind's default is to wander, that the return is possible, and that practicing the return changes the mind that practices it. So could meditation change how we understand the mind it already has? What began as a set of contemplative techniques now has one of the most robust evidence bases in behavioral medicine. The brain that was once considered fixed is now understood to be continuously reshaped by experience. The border between the physical and the psychological has been gently, persistently dissolved. The mind that meditates is not the same mind it was before, and the change is not mystical. It is measurable, reproducibly, and, perhaps most importantly, available. Night, and the quietness of it, is a kind of meditation too. The reduced stimulation, the darkness, the slower breath. These are conditions the nervous system recognizes as permission. All day, the brain manages the world. All night, it has the chance to manage itself. And sleep, in this sense, is the deepest meditation, the one the body knows how to enter on its own. Given enough stillness and enough trust, even a single session of meditation can produce measurable increases in positive effect, the general sense of ease and well-being that persist into the following hours. Studies have found this effect in complete beginners, with no prior experience, following just one guided session of 20 to 30 minutes. The threshold for experiencing the effects of meditation is lower than many people expect. The brain does not need months of training before it begins to listen. It begins to listen immediately. It was always listening. The final stage of many traditional meditation paths is described as the dissolution of the meditator, the moment when the separation between the one who is aware and the field of awareness itself becomes less fixed. Research on advanced practitioners in states described as non-dual awareness shows unusual brain activity patterns, reduced activity in the narrative self-processing regions, combined with sustained, bright awareness. From the outside, these meditators appear simply quiet. From the inside, they describe something that feels, in this subjective impression, like having arrived somewhere always known but rarely visited. The research continues to grow. In 2024 and 2025 alone, new studies confirmed the glymphatic effects of meditation, mapped deep brainwave changes during loving-kindness practice, documented long-term structural brain changes in meditators across multiple cultural contexts, and began tracing the molecular pathways through which meditation's anti-inflammatory effects are produced. The field is not done. It is just beginning to speak clearly enough for the rest of medicine to hear. What the meditators knew, the instruments are slowly confirming. The most honest thing science can say about meditation may be the simplest: it helps. It helps people sleep. It helps people feel less afraid. It helps brains age more gently. It helps bodies recover more fully. It helps minds find the space between thought and reaction that makes a different kind of life possible. The research does not make meditation magical. It makes it real. And that is, in its quiet way, enough. Stillness is not nothing. This is perhaps what the entire science of meditation has been demonstrating. In its careful, cumulative way, for 30 years, every moment of quiet presence changes something. Every breath attended to fully is a small act of neural construction. Every return from wandering is a gentle lesson the brain carries forward into every moment after. Stillness is not absence. It is where the most important work is done. The mind at rest heals. The mind at peace grows. The mind that has learned, through practice, to observe itself with something like curiosity and something like kindness. That mind does not need to be anything other than what it already is. This, at least, is what the long-term practitioners tend to report, and what the research, in its quieter moments, seems to confirm: that the practice does not add something missing. It reveals what was always present. Tonight, as you lie here, the glymphatic system may already be doing its quiet work, moving cerebrospinal fluid through the channels of your brain, carrying away the metabolic residue of the day. The same system that sleep optimizes, that meditation nudges toward activity. Your body is not waiting for you to do anything. It is already tending to itself, in the dark, exactly as it was designed. Something shifts. Toward the end of a long night of listening, the mind, visited by 100 quiet facts, no longer holds them actively. They have passed through, like water passing through stone, not retained as facts, perhaps, but felt as something, a texture, a quality of knowing, that the mind can be understood, that the brain can change. That stillness is a science as much as a practice, and that both have always been pointing in the same direction here. Now, this breath. The real change is not in meditation. It is in the one who meditates. the science points outward toward neurons, telomeres, cerebrospinal fluid, gamma waves. But what it is ultimately tracing is a transformation in a particular direction, away from bracing, toward ease, away from distance, toward presence, away from the story of the self, toward the experience of being alive in this body, in this moment, in this darkness that is not empty, but full of the same quiet intelligence that breathes the stars and turns the tides and keeps the blood moving through the sleeping heart. The most relaxing fact of all may simply be this: you do not have to do anything else tonight. You only have to stay here. And so, our quiet journey through the science of meditation comes to a gentle close. We began with the first breath that slows the heart. The first moment the nervous system begins to believe there is no danger here. We discovered that loving-kindness meditation reaches deep into the amygdala and hippocampus, changing the actual wave patterns of the brain at its most intimate depth. And we ended with the glymphatic system, the brain's silent housekeeper, awakened by sleep and perhaps also by stillness, quietly moving through the channels of the mind, making space for tomorrow. We've wandered from the ancient written record of the first meditators to the most recent imaging studies conducted only months ago, and found along the way that what the old practitioners described and what the modern instruments confirm are not so different. Both are pointing to the same place: this breath, this moment, this permission. The science of meditation reminds us that what happens in stillness is not the absence of living. It is where the most essential living takes place, in the quiet reorganization of the brain, the gradual softening of the nervous system, the slow accumulation of an inner architecture that holds more, braces less, and returns to peace more readily than before. The mind that has learned to rest is not a passive mind. It is a mind that has become, in the deepest sense, more itself. In these final minutes, take the deepest breath you can, as deep as possible. Think about consciousness itself, yours, mine, everyone listening tonight, all awareness everywhere, perhaps connected in ways we do not yet fully understand. The mind that observes itself, the awareness that becomes aware of awareness, is something science has not yet named completely. Perhaps because it is the instrument doing the naming. Let your entire being dissolve into the soft, breathing quiet, into the space before thought, into the formlessness that is not emptiness, but rest. Prepare for deep sleep. No boundaries left, only peace. If this thoughtful journey through the science of meditation helped quiet your mind tonight, a gentle subscribe or soft share could guide another tired soul here. This particular night, with its facts about loving kindness and glymphatic clearing and the 1,000 ways the mind learns to rest, might be exactly what someone else needs. One quiet tap, one sleepy soul at a time. Whatever you've been carrying today, whatever loops of thought were still turning when you lay down tonight, you don't need to carry them into sleep. They will still be there in the morning, if they need to be. Tonight, you belong only to yourself. You've traveled inward tonight, through corridors most people never pause to notice. You touched the architecture of a mind in the process of becoming, and found it more fluid, more capable of rest, more capable of grace than it perhaps appeared at the surface. You can allow these thoughts of meditation to fade now. like the moment between breath and breath, present, then softening, then simply part of everything, leaving only the unheld, warm calm behind. Let your breathing deepen. Let your body feel heavier, as if all you've observed tonight has been quietly sorted by careful, invisible hands and is simply setting itself down. If sleep comes, let it carry you the way the glymphatic system moves through the sleeping brain, not with force, but with quiet purpose, into a realm where time and weight no longer matter. If your eyes are still open, the next video is waiting for you, ready to continue the journey. But if they're closed, stay there. Stay in the darkness that feels safe and warm. Tomorrow, the mind will still be there, still tending, still capable of transformation, still breathing, still becoming. But tonight belongs to stillness. Rest well, sleepy soul. And remember, the mind that has learned to be kind to itself has already done the most important work. Good night.